Hey everyone, it's Nikki, and welcome back to another episode of Furry Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fantastic Mr. Fox was directed by Wes Anderson, written by Wes Anderson and Noah Baumbach, based on an original story by Roald Dahl, while the animation was directed by Mark Gustafson. The film was animated by 3 Mills Studio, and the puppets were made by McKinnon and Saunders. It is a stop-motion film, and it was released November 13th, 2009. Fantastic Mr. Fox is about the titular Mr. Fox, a former thief who has decided to move out of his burrow into a tree with his family, which is nearby 3 farmers that he used to steal from. Despite his idyllic family life, Mr. Fox longs for his days as a thief, and in doing so winds up in a battle between the animals and the human farmers. So this film has kind of a special place in my heart because A, it was the first Wes Anderson film I'd ever seen, and B, it's just so beautiful and I love it so much. But to kind of make this video not just me gushing about it, I've limited my favorite parts of the movie to one particular section, which I will go on to. So my first thing on my list of favorite parts of this film was the introduction of the 3 farmers. It very much takes from the original Roald Dahl book, and just the framing and description of the farmers is very funny, but also shows how menacing the 3 of them are, and I just really like their introduction as the villains. This is something throughout the movie, although mostly in the scene where Mr. Fox is arguing with his lawyer, but the animals say the word cuss rather than actually swearing throughout the whole movie, and I just thought that writing decision was really funny. Like, the cuss you are, it's really funny, and I really like that. Speaking of that same scene with Mr. Fox and his lawyer, who's a badger, the animals occasionally have kind of like wild or feral moments. The 2 get in an argument and end up like fighting each other and snarling. And I really like those moments throughout the film where in the version of the story, these are like animals, they're wild animals. And so to see them acting like animals at times while they're still wearing a suit and tie is very funny. So throughout the film, Mr. Fox's son Ash is in a bit of a rivalry with his cousin Christopherson. There's a scene where Ash jumps off a tree into a kiddie pool and absolutely just flops into it and makes a huge splash. And meanwhile, Christopherson does the same jump, but he ends up making it a beautiful swan dive with little splash. And I just thought that moment, of all the moments of their rivalry, stood out the most as being funny, but just like also well animated. The way the water splooshes up after they dive into the water was really interesting and cool. Then there's whatever the heck whack-bat is. Whack-bat is the sport that the animals in the area play, and it is purposefully the most convoluted kind of thing. It's like a mixture of cricket and like a bunch of other sports, and Christopherson immediately gets what's going on after Owen Wilson, Animal Man, tells him what's going on, and I just thought that whole scene, I just really liked it. I don't know what to say. The ball catches on fire at some point. It is a very confusing scenario. And there's a scene later in the film where Mrs. Fox catches Mr. Fox and his friend kind of going back to their old ways as thieves. And she makes one of the most iconic remarks in the movie, which is, "If what I think is happening, it had better not be." Just an iconic line from an iconic character. I love Mrs. Fox in this film. So towards the end of the movie, the animals are fighting against the humans because the humans are destroying the tree and the hill that they live on. And so they go on this kind of secret, like, undercover mission, and they all have these ski masks. Except for Ash, who doesn't have a ski mask of his own, but he made his own out of a sock. And it's just the funniest looking thing. Totally takes away any of the menace that the black ski mask would have had. On the human end, there's the fact that the farmers, in order to deal with the animals, get like a whole posse of like 1 billion different people with guns to try and take out this one fox, and I guess like some of the other animals, but there's just like, there's a showdown where there are just so many people armed to the teeth. It's like, you really are doing the most to get rid of one animal, like, although I guess it was warranted. And finally, there's the feral wolf towards the end of the movie, which Mr. Fox has talked about how he's afraid of wolves, but there's a wolf off in the distance and he tries to communicate with it to not really much success, but he gives him a fist bump and the wolf gives him a fist bump back, and you're just like, hell yeah. All right, so now I'm going to start talking about the more technical elements of this film, which include the storytelling and writing, the art style and character design, the setting and world building, the cinematography, and the performances. Storytelling and writing. As it's based on a Roald Dahl book and generally geared towards like family audiences, The story in this film is pretty simplistic, but it's really effective. The dialogue is great, very snappy and smart, and not pandering to children, which is nice. I was 10 when I saw this movie, so I appreciated that, or when I first saw it. And I liked the aforementioned cusses. They made me laugh every time. And the relationships built up over the course of the movie are good. I love Mr. and Mrs. Fox's relationship, as I mentioned earlier. I really like Mrs. Fox, and she's a good kind of counter to Mr. Fox, but not like a nagging wife that you see in a lot of kind of relationships in movies. I also really like the camaraderie Mr. Fox has with Kylie, who's an opossum, who's his like best friend and partner in crime. As an adult, I kind of find the animosity turned friendship arc of Ash and Christopherson to be a little bit trite, but I'm sure children get more out of that message than I do. Art style and character design. The stop motion in this film is beautiful. All of the puppets look great, as do their costumes. I also enjoy the low frame rate or simulated frame rate. I'm not sure if it was actually shot on 2s or if Wes Anderson just made it look that way. I don't remember. Which gives the film a nostalgic feel, a la Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and those kinds of movies. And I also like that the fur tends to move around a bit between each frame as the animators adjust the characters' expressions and poses. It's like an unintentional thing, but I really like it. Setting and world building. I love the setting of this world. It looks so beautiful. All the sets are magical. I would love to see them in an exhibit one day. They're just stunning. I like that the animals have their own little world set aside from the humans, although I was a bit perplexed by the existence of like fully normal animals, like the farmer's dogs. They've got these like rabid guard dogs and poultry, and the kind of semi-normal animals like the wolf that Mr. Fox, they gave the fist bump to at the end. And then these like totally anthro animals like Mr. Fox and all of his family and friends. Still, I think the literal and figurative setting of this movie are really fun. And like I said, beautiful. Cinematography. As a Wes Anderson movie, you know going into this film that it will at least look good, and boy does it deliver. The awesome backgrounds and puppets used in this film are enhanced by interesting cinematography, not just his like iconic symmetrical composition. It makes the film both beautiful to watch and look at, if that makes any sense, you know? Performances. Like a lot of animated movies starting in the 2000s, this film has an all-star cast. I especially love Meryl Streep as Mrs. Fox and Jason Schwartzman as Ash, but everyone in the film is great. So before I wrap this review up, I wanted to kind of consider comparisons this film has to other media. Obviously, as a Roald Dahl adaptation, this film feels like an animated fairy tale or fable that I would have read as a kid, although it doesn't really have a moral like these fables normally would, given that most of the main cast are thieves in some way. I'm sure there are comparisons to be made with Renard the Fox, albeit way toned down for a family audience. This film also reminds me a bit of Disney's Robin Hood, due to the main character being a fox with a penchant for stealing from villains. In terms of its animation, however, other than Anderson's later film Isle of Dogs, it's pretty unique, even within the greater scope of stop motion, due to its overall production design, such as like the fur on the puppets. My final thoughts for Fantastic Mr. Fox are that it is a fun, beautiful film that I thoroughly enjoyed as a kid, and I still thoroughly enjoy now, albeit with a bit more appreciation for the craft that goes into making animated films. I definitely recommend giving it a watch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!